In today's world, people feel lost in a sea of ideas. Which ones should we accept? Stay tuned because you're listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. Here is your host, Kurt Jarris.
Good day, everyone. This is not Kurt Jarris. I am, in fact, Chris Yiesla, usually on the other side of the bench, but today have the honor of filling in for Kurt as he is away on other business today and still recovering from his terrible diagnosis of bronchitis. We wish him a speedy recovery and look forward to next week when he will be with us on the show again. Hello, welcome. I don't know if you guys knew this. I wanted to throw a fact your way. Maybe you're going to hear it here first. Veracity Hill is the #1 international apologetics podcast being recorded in West Chicago every week. You hear it here, folks. #1 international apologetics podcast being recorded here in West Chicago. Welcome, everyone. How's everybody doing today? Welcome to the podcast. We are in episode 32, and we're talking today about mere Christianity, which is something we touched on back during the Thanksgiving break. Hope you're all having a great day. Welcome to mid-February, or as we call it here in West Chicago 2017, the first day of summer. If you would like to have your voice heard on today's show as we dive into today's topic, which we'll be talking about shortly, please feel free to give us a call at 505-2-STRIVE. That's 505-278-7483. Also, you can text the show by texting the word Veracity, that's our name, Veracity, to the number 555-888. It makes it really easy to text in your questions. If you're away from your computer or don't feel like talking on the show, you can text us your questions at any time, and we'll read them either on the show or later on another episode, because we keep track of all those things. So let's dive into things. Welcome to the show, Veracity Hill. We're striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. And we have an exciting, our parent company, our umbrella organization, Defenders Media, is putting on an exciting new opportunity for you guys. We want to make available and a present to you guys. We're hosting a all-day, one-day conference called Reliable. Can You Trust the Bible? And we'll be having that over in Wheaton at Faith Covenant Church on March 18th. That's just 1 month from now. And that's from 9 a.m. to 3:45. Reliable. Can you trust the Bible? We'll be having speakers Ted Wright, founder of Epic Archaeology, and Kurt Jarris, obviously our executive director here at Defenders Media and Veracity Hill. And here's a little bit about what we're doing at the conference. So some of the first lines of attacks against the Christian faith are made against the veracity, there's that word again, and reliability of the Bible. There's no evidence for the Exodus. Why are there contradictions in the gospel? The God of the Old Testament is evil. The Bible is translated many times just like the game of telephone. Heard that one before, folks. Join Ted Wright from Epic Archaeology and Kurt Jarris from Defenders Media as they explore answers to these and other objections to the Bible. So we encourage you all to come to Reliable. Can You Trust the Bible? An all-day conference being held at Faith Covenant Church in Wheaton, Illinois on March 18th from 9 a.m. to 3:45 p.m. You can register and find out more information at defendersmedia.com. That's defendersmedia.com. So, we are looking at mere Christianity. If you haven't, this is part 2, if you can tell from the episode title. If you haven't listened to part 1, you're listening to recording right now, I urge you to pause this episode and go back to the Thanksgiving series, Mere Christianity, Part 1, Right and Wrong as a Clue to the Meaning of the Universe. And we're talking about Part 2 today. And what we're striving to do is take a look at the facts around us as human beings and be like, listen, is there anything we can learn about our universe and anything behind it, if there is anything behind it? And we talked about that in Part 1. And also heard from a very old recording from 2005 from the great speaker Michael Ramsden, who's associated with Rabbi Zacharias Ministries, who spoke in 2005 on Do All Paths Lead to God? And his first part of his talk was very relevant to our conversation last time we spoke, and his second part of his talk is even more relevant to today's conversation, which, if you saw in the title, is the power behind the moral law, which we talked about in the first episode. So if you remember how we concluded way back, if I can pull you all back to Thanksgiving, if I can pull you back to our conclusion, we wrapped up by saying that there is a real moral law, a power behind that law, and that we have broken that law. These are things we're all aware of. So we're aware that there is a moral law, a law in every single one of us that we can detect and we expect from others, and that is a very logical conclusion. And we concluded also that there is a power of some kind, we don't know yet, behind this law. and that we have broken this law on a regular basis by our own admission, if nothing else, and put ourselves at odds with whatever this power is. And that can't mean good things for us. So it is within our benefit as human beings to figure out, okay, what is this moral law, and what exactly is this power behind the moral law? And if I've put myself at odds with this great power, how do I get myself right? That seems like it would be of infinite benefit to us as humans and our desire for survival. So now that we've established the presence of a power, a god, let's just say a god, for the sake of common verbiage, you hear like this power is referred to in many cultures many times as a god. And if you've spent any time studying the ontological argument, which we will not be talking about today because that's a little beyond my pay grade, it makes sense that cultures would call this power a god. That's just logically feasible, all right? A god. So we've established the presence of this god or a god. We need to see what are some of the broad conceptions of this God, and where does Christianity fall into the mix. So last time we kept Christianity and any common notion of God largely out of the picture. Today we are actually going to be introducing some worldviews, including and especially Christianity, because we'll be drawing from Mere Christianity and the section of the book called What Christians Believe. So it'll be very hard for me to avoid any references to the Christian faith. So we need to see, where does Christianity fall into the mix? What are these conceptions of God? And what does Christianity have anything to say about this power? So I'm going to start by reading from Lewis today, which I will be doing a lot of since he really says what he says best, and I can't really say it any better. So the first thing we're going to be doing when we're looking at what is this power, what are the conceptions or the beliefs about this power, we're going to be doing this very broadly today, except for the view on Christianity that we'll be honing in on, because obviously I'm speaking from that worldview, and I'm trying to discuss and introduce that worldview to some of you, maybe for the first time. So let's divide humanity into camps based on what they believe about this power or the moral law or everything else that we talked about during Thanksgiving. So here's what Lewis has to say on this. The first big division of humanity, right, is the majority of humanity who believe in some kind of God or gods, and the minority who do not. So on this point, Christianity lines up with the majority, obviously, lines up with ancient Greeks and Romans, modern savages, Stoics, Platonists, Hindus, Mohammedans, or as they're more commonly referred to today as Muslims or Islam, etc., and so on and so forth. So as a disclaimer, remember this book was written several decades ago. So while the concepts and truths have not passed out of fashion, thank goodness, a lot of the verbiage has. So you'll hear Lewis refer to Muslims or Islam as Mohammedans, because that was the common verbiage in England at the time. So we have all of those views against, say, the Western world materialism that we see today, or was present in Europe at the time and still is. So we've got these two big camps, those that believe that there is a God or power and those that don't, obviously. And historically and statistically, you can go to any Pew poll or stat or anything else, census, and view that the majority of human beings believe in a power, a God or gods, and the minority do not. So we're going to take those camps. We're going to take a look at that majority camp. We're going to see if we can make that a little bit smaller. All right, so let's take these ideas about there being a God and divide them into two different camps again, which Lewis does here. So we have these two different ideas on the presence or the existence of God. What is it? What is his power? One of the ideas is the idea that he or it is beyond good and evil. We humans call one thing good and another thing bad. We do this very often. But according to some people, that is merely our human point of view. These people would say that it is the more wise you become, the less you would want to call anything good or bad, and the more clearly you would see that everything is good in one way and bad in another, and that nothing could have been different. So that's one idea. The other, an opposite idea, is that God is quite definitely good or righteous, a God who takes sides, who loves love, and hates hatred, who wants us to believe in one way and not in another. So the first of these views, the one that thinks God is beyond good and evil, is called pantheism. He says it is held by a great Prussian philosopher, Hegel, and as far as I can understand him, by the Hindus and, of course, by pantheists. The other view is held by Jews, Muslims or Mohammedans, and Christians. So we've divided the concept of God, again, into two broad camps. We have God is all and in everything. He's part of the universe, and the universe is part of him. We are all part of God. And the other view is that God is distinct from the universe he created and is inherently good in the second view. And obviously we can divide those into two different camps. So we have We have certain pantheists, we have Hindus, certain subsections of Buddhism would fall into this pantheistic view, some sections. And then we have this other view that says that God or gods are beyond good and evil, or excuse me, that are definitely good and righteous and pick sides. That's held by Jews, Muslims, Christians. And you can see a lot of commonalities in what they believe. So we see those two views and we say, okay, well, God is beyond good and evil. And if he's beyond good and evil, when we're talking about the moral law, we really have nothing more to say on this point at this time about the pantheistic view of God, that God is in everything and beyond good and evil. Because if he's beyond good and evil, then we really have nothing to worry about, because all things are good in one way and evil in another. And this discussion about the moral law and good and evil is really a moot point, and we can stop there. But I would like to continue this conversation, so we're going to be looking at the other view. Obviously, the view that is held by Jews, Muslims, and Christians, that God is definitely good, this power is definitely good, and pick sides, and so on and so forth. But here's a problem that we run into that we're going to be spending a good deal of time addressing today, is if a god or gods or a power is good and picks sides and is the power behind the moral law and the universe and so on and so forth, we have a problem, because the universe appears to have gone wrong. Things have gone wrong. Things are bad in some sense. But we find that this power, this God in ourselves and in the universe insists very loudly on our putting things right again. So here's the question then. Here's the question of the day. If a good God made the world, why has it gone wrong? Now, this will sound very much like the problem of evil. We're not going to be talking about the problem of evil today. We've already talked about it on the show, and Kurt Jaros does a fantastic job regularly during the show or in lectures elaborating on what the problem of evil is. But we are going to be touching on elements of it in this question. If a good God made the world, why has it gone wrong? And Lewis alludes here to a time when he was an atheist, before he became a Christian, which was a good part of his early life up through college and university, where he talks about he had a problem with this argument as an atheist, because his main argument as an atheist was that against his argument against God was that the universe seemed cruel and unjust. But how had he gotten the idea of just and unjust? Here's what he says: how had I gotten the idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of what a straight line is. So what was I comparing this universe when I called it unjust? If the whole show was bad and senseless from A to Z, so to speak, why did I, who was supposed to be a part of the show, find myself in such violent reaction to it? Of course, I could have given up my idea of justice by saying it was nothing but a private idea of my own, and that would eliminate the need for God, but that also eliminates another problem. If I did that, then my argument against God also collapsed, because the argument depended on saying that the world was really unjust, not simply that it happened to please my fancies. So this is not an answer necessarily to if God is good, why has the world gone wrong, but it does answer the question of, or does address some of the fallacies in the argument. Well, the universe is cruel and unjust, which are very true observations that we can make, all human beings of the universe. But we can't necessarily conclude that therefore God does not exist, because if God, who is supposed to be just, does not exist, then where had we gotten our feelings of justice, if not from something higher than us? And we could say, well, no, it's a convention of society, and if so, then we are saying that the universe does not happen to please our fancies at the moment. We talked about this a little bit at Thanksgiving, about the difference between preference and an actual law that we expect from all human beings. So let's sum up this problem. Let's go a little bit deeper on this question. If a good power has made the universe, why has it gone wrong, and what happens? So here's the problem that really we're left with. We have this universe. This is something I hope that all human beings would agree upon in some way or another. We have a universe, check, we all live in a universe, that contains much that is obviously bad and apparently meaningless. I think many human beings, including Christians from time to time, would agree with this statement. Excuse me. But we have a universe that contains much that is obviously bad and apparently meaningless, but contains creatures like us, mankind, who know that it is bad and meaningless and are very much opposed to this. So that's the problem that we find ourselves in. We have a universe that contains much that is obviously bad and apparently meaningless, but contains creatures like ourselves who know that it is bad and meaningless. So this creates a kind of a head scratcher that I hope all human beings will lean in and consider with me for a moment. Now, Lewis, at the time, says, hey, there are only two very broad views that, for his sensibilities, satisfy this problem. One is, of course, Christianity to him. Now, I'm not saying that de facto that is right in the meaning of this conversation. We will address what Christianity has to say later in the show. But he says, I think Christianity is a very sensible way to address this problem. Another sensible way, the second most sensible way, is something that he calls dualism, which isn't a phrase we hear very often, but it's something that it exists in a lot of our culture, in a way we view fiction and nonfiction, and in certain religious aspects. Well, here's what dualism is. When he refers to dualism, maybe this will help make sense. Maybe this will be something that you recognize. Dualism is the idea that there are two equal powers, not just one God or one power, but two equal powers. One of them is inherently good, and one of them is inherently evil, and they are forever locked in an eternal and endless war in the universe, which is their battlefield. So we have one good and one evil. One is evil because it is evil, and one is good because it is good, and they are equal powers that are the powers that be, and they war throughout all of the universe, and that's just the way of things. And it seems like on the surface, a sensible idea. We see this in a lot of the ways we portray certain characters, especially in fantasy or fiction. We see it in the way certain religious ideas are presented to us as well. When we have told stories or we have thought about good and evil, I'm sure this thought has occasionally crossed our mind. What if there are two beings that are all powerful and one of them is good and one of them is evil? Sometimes human beings who have different worldviews or who have a worldview that they really haven't thought through will say, like, yes, that's just the way of things. There's this good thing over here, and look, that's obviously that evil power working over there, and that's just the way of things. That is either a legitimate worldview or a worldview they haven't thought through very much. So that seems on the surface, reasonable. In fact, Lewis says, apart from Christianity, to his mind, it is the second most reasonable explanation for what's going on. But upon examining it deeply, which I hope you will all do with now, we find some holes. Now, I hope you all, when we were talking about this just now, visioned times that you have thought about this or have seen this. Examples you can pull from your own life or life walk or stories or worldviews that you have been a part of or experienced. And you will be like, yes, I understand illustrations of a being that's good and a being that's evil. In reality, and I want you to think very hard about this, in reality, from your own experiences, we do not have any experience of anyone liking badness or evil just because it is bad. No one is evil just for the sake of evil. Let me say that again. We have no experience. Think in your life of people you know, of people you've seen in real life, in reality, people you've heard of, even the really, really nasty ones. We have no experience of anyone liking badness just because it is bad. So think about this. Chris, how can you say that? You may say to me, Chris, like, I can think of some really nasty people who've done some really nasty things. Are you telling me they're not bad? Well, of course, when they're acting in this way, they are bad. But think about this. All of the things that they're doing through evil are actually a perverted desire to get to something good. For instance, think about this. Let's pick an obvious one, Hitler, right? He did some very evil things. But he had a good desire to be superior, to have peace for his people on a broad level, to be the superior race, to have Germany be supreme and to be wealthy and to be prosperous on a very broad scale. But he went about this in very evil ways. When someone steals, they're usually not thinking like, oh, good, I get an opportunity to steal today. But they're usually thinking like, man, that is an awesome car. That is a good thing. I want that car. Up until this point, he hasn't committed evil yet. But the second he steals it, he's committed evil. So you think about this, even the really nasty people we see end up in courts and jail and prison sentences that do really, really bad things on a regular basis. Let's say they are serial killers or rapists of this kind. Who knows? Things in this vein. They are committing horrendous acts, evil acts, that should be justly served out in a sentence. They should receive a just sentence. But in the moment when they are seeking these things, perverted as it may be, they are looking for something that inherently is good. They're not doing this because it's evil. Like, oh, I just didn't kill because it's killing. If I'm a serial killer, I enjoy the act of killing. I'm looking for joy as a serial killer. Now, let's not go down too far to this rabbit hole. We're not here to psychologically examine either my motives for doing things, which of course are not a serial killer, or anyone else's at this time. But do you see my point? That anyone who does something evil, small or large, is doing it because they're looking for something good. Joy is inherently a good thing. Wealth is inherently a good thing, right? Happiness is a great thing. But the way in which they go about it does not bring these things. It's evil, right? Think about this too. When I thought about this as a child, I used to think about powers of good and evil. Like, hey, there's this good thing and he's good, and this evil guy and he's evil, and there's always this lock between them. And so I would sometimes, when I played my little imaginary mock battles with my friends, or I got out my toys as a kid, I would create this good side, and they were good just because they were good. And we had this evil side, and they were evil just because they were evil. And they were the two big powers. But I always, for some reason, as a child, I always would make an arbiter. I always would make someone who was above either power, who they would come to and talk to in times of peace, and he would judge certain things. And I don't remember why I felt the need to do this, but it was very interesting to me as I was thinking this week that I always did this as a child. That it wasn't satisfactory to me then, who had not developed a worldview, that it wasn't sufficient that there be a good power only and an evil power only, and that they're just good because they're good and evil because they're evil. No, I'm like, there needs to be something that is more. There needs to be something that's more than just the sake of things. And so we see this regularly, that when we see evil or wickedness, it's a parasite, really. It's not an original thing. It's just a perversion of a pursuit of a good thing that goes horribly wrong. So dualism on the surface, while somewhat reasonable, doesn't really satisfy reality when you look at the depth of it, in my opinion. Maybe you have a different opinion, would like to express it on the show, 505-278-7483. So that's something that we leave ourselves with. This Christianity is still, looks like the most reasonable explanation, but when we look at Christianity right now, you're saying, and Lewis is saying, listen, guys, Chris, this is still a problem. If God has made the world, if a good God has made the world, why has it gone wrong? Because everything looks apparently meaningless and very harsh. And if there's a good power, what's going on here? And Christianity definitely is called to the stand to answer some of these things. We're going to take a look at some of these answers in depth. If there is a good God, what is he doing about this? We're going to find out when we come back after the break. Stay tuned. We're going to have a short break here from some of our sponsors.
You're listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society.
Are you tired of wasting your time and money on ads that just aren't producing? What if there was an easier way to get great advertising results with tons of traffic and social engagement to your brand without wasting your time or money? Well, there is an easier way, and it's called TrafficBuffet.com, a new and easy way to generate the traffic you need through our global network of publishers, all with one click. Explode your site traffic and send tens of thousands of potential customers to your site daily. Build your brand with our social campaigns like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and more. Our dedicated account reps provide amazing support. So don't wait. Get started today. TrafficBuffet.com. Measurable results, driving success.
Evangelical Christians are talking about hell. What if we believe what we believe because we've always believed it? What if the gospel is really a matter of life and death? We want you to open your mind, open your Bible, and rethink hell. At rethinkinghell.com, evangelicals look at what the Bible says about hell, putting conventional and controversial views to the test.
Defending Christianity, religious liberty, legislating morality. Join renowned speaker and award-winning author Dr. Frank Turek for his biblical insights on today's issues at the Illinois Family Institute Worldview Conference, Saturday, February 18th at the Village Church of Barrington.
If you want to be in government, only atheists can be in government. Does it say that anywhere? No.
The Illinois Family Institute Worldview Conference.
Pastors were not called to be tax exempt. We were called to be salt and light.
Tickets for the IFI Worldview Conference are $20 per person and just $50 per family. Student scholarships are available. Seating is limited, so please register at illinoisfamily.org or call the IFI office 708-781-9328, illinoisfamily.org, or call 708-781-9328.
Welcome back to the show. I am not Kurt Jarris. I'm Chris Yiesla, and I don't like Pepsi. We're at Veracity Hill here, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. If you want to have your voice heard, give us a call at 505-2STRIVE. That's 505-278-7483. Or you can text the word Veracity, Veracity, to get hooked up via texting to 555-888. If you're already hooked up, you can text us a question now, today, on the show to 555-888. If you can't, call us. Feel free to text. Hey, that conference that's happening today that we just heard the ad for is actually happening right now. And if you're over in that area, we encourage you to swing by and check out the Defenders presence that we have there. Our good and solid leader, Kurt, is over there attending the conference, and we are excited to be part of it. So let's continue on with our show. Before we jump back into today's topic, we actually have some text and comments from last time we had the show. So we're going to go ahead and open up the mailbag and take a look at what those questions are today. Welcome to the mailbag. This is Kurt's favorite segment, but he's not here, so I get to play the music. All right, so that was the mailbag theme song. We have some mail, snail mail in the form of digital text from Bob and Rick, who wrote in on last week's show. If you remember, last week we talked about immigration, which right now is a very, very hot issue. And we had some very interesting guests. We had 3 speakers, including Kurt, weigh in on what exactly is going on. We have a comment here from Bob. Bob says, thanks for the show. It cleared up some concerns I had. Also like that you, being Kurt, said that welfare is tied to the immigration issue. Yes, so immigration is a very complex issue. And certain things are tied into it that we don't always see on the surface when we hear news reports about it or see news scroll by on Facebook. Thanks, Bob, for the comment. Really appreciate it. Thanks for listening to the show. Rick says, hey, overuse of the wastebasket, excessively broad and vague term, the left, especially when said pejoratively, caused the speaker to lose credibility in my eyes. Thank you, Rick, for your feedback. We really appreciate it. Now, let me explain for those of you who are wondering, what's the wastebasket? Rick is a very awesome, intelligent listener, and he's referring to the wastebasket diagnosis, which in medical terminology is a diagnosis that you can just kind of throw away. It really isn't the diagnosis, but we're giving it to you now so we can satisfy the reasons for the questions that you have in medical terms. Thankfully, in medical arenas, this does not happen too often, but when it does, it's a throwaway diagnostic. It's not really the real thing, but it's what it is until it's not that thing. So that's what he's referring to when he says the wastebasket. And he's referring to one of our speakers who used the term the left quite a bit. And when she said it pejoratively, which pejoratively means a word that is used in a negative context on a regular basis. So he had some very interesting opinions about our first speaker on last week's show. If you're interested on our first speaker on last week's show, you can go check out veracityhill.com and go to episode 31, Immigration. Thank you, Bob and Rick, for your comments on last week's show. We appreciate you guys weighing in. We encourage all of you to weigh in with your opinions, either live or from the mailbag. Let's continue on to this week's topic. We're at the point now in our show where we're talking about if a good God made the world, why has it gone wrong? Thanks for sticking with us today at Veracity Hill. Isn't he the authority on this? If a good God made the world, why has it gone wrong? What is he going to do about it? It doesn't make sense. If the world has gone wrong, isn't he the ultimate authority? Well, Lewis starts to paint a picture here of, 1, why this is not as simple as it seems, and 2, what is this good God going to do about it? That's what we're going to be spending the rest of our show talking about today. Anyone who has been in authority, much like this power or God we would presume is, anyone who has been in authority knows how a thing can be in accordance with your will one way and not in another. For instance, think about this. If you are a parent listening on the show today and you ask your child, say, hey, listen, Phil, I want you to clean your room. I want you to obey and clean your room. Is it your will that you want Phil to clean his room? Yes. But then a week later, or maybe even the same day, you walk into Phil's room and you find that the room is still a mess, isn't it? Well, you have willed that Phil, That rhymes. You have willed that Phil would clean his room, but he has not cleaned his room. It is your will that has allowed him the option to clean his room, but it is also your will that has allowed it to not be so. It's not what you have willed that he leave his room dirty, but it is your will that has made it possible. Does that make sense? So God has willed, or this power has willed, that we have will. So you have willed that your son, in this hypothetical example, also has a will to clean his room, and you're hoping he uses it to do so. But there's also the off chance that he will not. So free will that God, or this power, has willed, though it makes evil or things contrary to God's will possible. So free will, though it makes evil possible, is also the only thing that makes possible any love or goodness or joy worth having. But of course, if you gain a will, if you gain a self, once you have that self, there's a very real possibility of putting that self first, wanting to be the center, wanting to be, dare I say, God, in fact. Here's something interesting. So we have this God, we've said, hey, isn't he authority on this? And he said, yes, I'm the authority, and I've used my authority, my will, to give you all wills, because that makes a lot of the goodness and love in this world possible. But I understand that some of you will use it to try and be God or be the center or not do good things. In fact, do evil things. We have tried as a race for millennia to find things other than God that will fulfill us. We have done this. This is basically what history is. It's a story of us trying to find things other than a God that will fill us up. A journey that, oddly enough, we have found as a species somewhat unfulfilling. And I want to walk through. Lewis has a very large text here, and I'm going to read to you guys now. Let's say here's what his opinion is, from what he can gather from the facts on history and human free will, and what is God doing about the problem that we have maybe created. Let's take a look. So if we have this history and we're not fulfilling ourselves, here's what Lewis has to say about this. He says, God made us, invented us as a man invents an engine. A car is made to run on gasoline and would not run properly on anything else. Now God designed the human machine to run on himself. He himself is the fuel our spirits were designed to burn, or the food our spirits were designed to feed on. There is no other. That is why it is just no good asking God to make us happy in our own way without bothering about religion. God cannot give us a happiness and peace apart from himself because it is not there. There is no such thing. This is the key to history. Terrific energy is expended, civilizations are built up, excellent institutions devised, and each time something goes wrong, some fatal flaw always brings the selfish and cruel people to the top, and it all slides back into misery and ruin. In fact, the machine conks. It seems to start up right and run a few yards, and then it just breaks down. They are trying to run on the wrong juice. So any historian will tell you that this pattern is viable. It is repeated for literally every great civilization that has ever been has run through this pattern. No historian will tell you otherwise. They are trying to run, Lewis says they are trying to run on the wrong juice. This is what Satan, or the enemy, has done to us humans. So what did this power, what did God do? All right, so here's what his response is. Here's what God did. This is what Lewis says. First of all, he left us conscience, the sense of right and wrong. And all throughout history, there have been people trying, and some of them very hard, to obey it. None of them ever quite succeed. This is what we talked about largely, taking a break from Lewis, this is what we talked about largely during Thanksgiving. Right and wrong as a clue to the meaning of the universe. Let's go back. Secondly, he sent the human race what I call good dreams. I mean those queer stories scattered throughout all of the heathen religions about a God who died and comes back to life, and again, by his death, has somehow given new life to men. Now, some of you, in hearing this, may think, well, Chris, that's a bunch of baloney. I think that's a little bit of a stretch. Actually, Lewis, in the good time that he was an atheist, even before and after his conversion to Christianity, one of his things that were both a great love of his and he was expert on were mythologies and stories of these kinds. He was very, very well versed in ancient Greek and Latin literature, Norse mythology, Greek mythology, etc., and so on and so forth. So he was very intimately acquainted with these details. In fact, if you go and read and learn about his testimony, these stories were actually very important signposts toward leading him to Christ, because he looked at these and went, and made the observations that we just read here, where there's seems to be these common myths about this God who becomes a man who dies and through his death saves his people. And you see it all throughout these myths. And eventually he found a story that he deemed a little bit more true than the myths he had been reading. That's where we're getting to. So thirdly, we have these myths. Thirdly, he selected one particular people and spent several centuries hammering into their heads the sort of God he was, that there was only one of him, and that he cared about right conduct very much. These people were the Jews. And the Old Testament gives an account of the hammering process. So let's review God's solution to this world that has gone wrong. He's given us 1, conscience, right and wrong. 2, he's given us good dreams in mythology about what he intended to do, so that we would always be aware of what his plan was. 3rd, he chose a people, the Jews, and hammered into their head for centuries exactly who he was, so they would be intimately acquainted with this God and could accurately describe it to the rest of the world. Here is what and who this God is. Here is his character. Here are his laws. Here is his will. These people, the Jews, through the Old Testament, through all of their history, have been intimately acquainted with these things. Here's step 2 of God's plan. So we have the Jews, these people who know who God is very well. Here comes the real shock, Lewis says. Among these Jews, there suddenly turns up a man who goes about talking as if he was God. He claims to forgive sins. He says he has always existed. He says he is coming to judge the world at the end of time. Now let us get this clear. Among pantheists, like Hindus, Indians, and I mean, of course, those from the continent, or the country of India, not the Native American slang we find here in America. Among pantheists like the Indians, anyone might say that he was part of God, or one with God, or that there would be nothing odd about this statement. But this man, since he was a Jew, could not mean that kind of God. God, in their language, meant the being outside the world who had made it and was infinitely different from anything else. And when you have grasped that, you will see that what this man said was, quite simply, the most shocking thing that has ever been uttered by human lips. End quote. This is very interesting. So we have this man who shows up among the Jews who says he's God. He can forgive sins and he's existed forever. That's quite strange, isn't it? Given his claim, he's not referring to a pantheistic sort of God, but a Jewish sort of God, a God who is outside the universe, who values good, and so on and so forth, that he is him, in fact. Then Lewis says this: I really want to prevent anyone saying the really foolish thing that people often say about him, which of course him, in this sense, is referring to this man who is named Jesus. I'm ready, he says, he doesn't want anyone to say this foolish thing. I'm ready to accept Jesus as a great moral teacher, but I don't accept his claim to be God. That is one thing we must not say. A man who was merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic on a level with a man who says he is a poached egg, seems strange, or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman, or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool, you can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come up with any patronizing nonsense about him being a great human teacher. He has not left that open to us. He did not intend to. So we find here a very odd fork in the road when this man who came from the Jewish people claimed to be God. That was the core of what he said when he was here. So we have a decision to make. We have some very interesting things before us. We have a world that has gone wrong. We have a God who has a plan, who has left us certain things and a certain people and certain rules. And then among these people shows up this man named Jesus who says, oh, I'm God, and I can forgive sins, and I've always existed. We are not left many options when considering what to think about what he says. Now, while I let that roll around in your mind, I would like to turn your attention from our friend C.S. Lewis to our other friend, Michael Ramsden. His second part of his talk, the same talk we introduced in Thanksgiving, Do All Paths Lead to God, I think will be very relevant to what we have to say today, especially this last statement about Jesus and whether or not he is the Son of God or a liar or a madman. So let us listen now. I'm going to leave you with Michael Ramsden for his part 2 of his wonderful talk. This was, again, a talk that he gave to a local church in the Midwest in 2005. So the recording can only be found regularly in modern times here on Veracity Hill. So I hope you enjoy this talk, again, from Michael Ramsden.
I need you to stay with me at this point, and we're probably going to run out of time, so I may stick at the preaching speed a little bit, if that's okay with you, just to make sure that we finish sometime before 1 o'clock. If you take any philosophical or religious system, you will see that it is grounded or rooted in one of 3 ways. If you take any philosophical or religious system, you'll see that it is rooted or grounded either in thinking, what we philosophically would call the epistemological, or in feeling, which we would call the existential, or in doing, the pragmatical. If you take any world religion or any philosophical system, you'll see that it is rooted or grounded in one of those 3 things, either thinking, feeling, or doing. Some world religions try to combine all 3 of those together to make a comprehensive system. So if you are studying Hinduism, for example, they will talk about, in philosophical Hinduism, right thinking, right feeling, right doing, as being a 3-fold path to take you to where you want to go. Now, systems which are rooted in thinking tell you that you need to master a certain set of ideas. That if you want to get to grips with the questions about life, the universe, meaning, significance, God, and everything else, there are certain philosophical ideas that you must master, get to grips with, understand, and once you know how to control and manipulate those ideas, you will finally have the keys to unlock the mysteries as to our own existence, why we're here, who God is, and so on. Systems which are rooted in feeling tell you to engage with the mystical, to stretch out with your feelings, to look after that, look for and hanker for that experience in life that will become defining and will help define you in relation to God, into this world, and to everything else. And systems which are rooted in doing are very pragmatical. They tell you to do certain things, live in a certain way, put certain principles into effect, and if you do all of those things, you will eventually become the person that you want to be. As a matter of fact, the idea of doing something and defining ourselves on the basis of what we do is what is very popular within the West right now, where we all define ourselves and get our sense of worth from what we do. The amazing thing about the Christian faith is that it is not rooted in any one, nor even in a combination of those 3 things. The Christian faith is not rooted in thinking, feeling, or doing. The Christian faith is not rooted in thinking, even though there is nothing more profound than knowing Him. It is not rooted in feeling, even though there's nothing more thrilling than meeting the person of Christ. And it is not rooted pragmatically in doing, even though Jesus Christ said Christians were to be known by the things that they had done. Jesus Christ did not come into this world simply to give the human race a new system of thought, a new kind of experience, or even to encourage us to do good things for God. Jesus Christ did not come to tell us about God. Jesus Christ came as God Himself. He claimed to reveal who God is, not to offer us ideas about God, not to offer us experiences from God, not even to tell us what to do for God. He came as God Himself and said, if you have seen me, you have seen God. You can take any founder of any major world religion out of the religious system and it will still stand. You can take Buddha out of Buddhism. If you talk to a Buddhist monk and say, look, did it have to be Buddha who gave us these teachings and gave us this insight, or could it have been anyone? They will say, look, it could have been anyone. Anyone could have done it. But historically, it was the person of Buddha who gave us this teaching, which is why it's called Buddhism. But it could have been anybody else. If you were to ask a Muslim, did it have to be Muhammad through whom this revelation came to us? Or could it have been anyone else? Was God free to choose anyone? The response will be no. God was free to choose anyone. Historically, He chose the person of Muhammad. But if it hadn't been Muhammad, it would have been John, it would be Johnism. It doesn't have to be Muhammad, but he is the one they believe that God chose. But you cannot take Christ out of Christian. If you take Christ out of Christian, you are left with the letters I-A-N, and Ian cannot help you. Jesus has not come into this world to offer us a system of thought or an experience. You cannot take Him out of the system because He is the substance of the revelation that He actually came to see. The Christian faith, therefore, is not rooted either in the idea of thinking or feeling or doing, but ultimately grounded in the idea of being. Not thinking, feeling, or doing, but ultimately in being. Let me try to illustrate this for you. Thought comes to us through words. Systems of thought find their expression in words. Words actually are revealed thoughts. My words reveal my thoughts to you. It is through my words that you know what I'm thinking, or not thinking. But what do we read in the Gospel of John? We read in John 1:4 that the Word has become flesh and dwelt amongst us. A communication and revelation of God, not through the abstract of a word, but now in the concrete person of Jesus Christ. That's why in the Bible we read that in the past, God spoke to us through His prophets in Hebrews 1, but in these latter days He has spoken to us through His Son. Jesus Christ is the Word. Systems which are rooted in feeling. As I said, we're looking after that experience in life that will help you to define everything else. Some kind of experience in life that will transform everything else around it. But moments in life are temporary. Interestingly, Jesus Christ in John 3 verse 36 defined life in terms of knowing Him. He said, if you do not know me, you will not see life. But if you know me, you will not taste death. Jesus Christ defined life in terms of Him. To encounter the person of Jesus Christ is not to have an experience in life. Knowing Jesus Christ is the moment of life itself. Life does not begin until you know Him. Jesus Christ did not come into this world to take bad people and make them good. His message was much more radical than that. His message was that we are actually not alive. We are all dead. Dead, that Jesus had to say, in our sin and our transgression. We are not alive. We are dead. And we are going to move when our heart stops beating from death into eternal death. Jesus did not come with us into this world, He told us, to make bad people and make them good. He came into this world to take dead people and make them live. Do you know that kind of life in your own life? Have you ever experienced that encounter with Christ, which actually fundamentally changes who you are? Systems rooted pragmatically in doing tell us to do certain things and live this way. In John 6:28, the disciples come to Jesus and they ask Him a question in the plural. They say, what must we do to do the works God requires? Jesus replies in the singular. The work of God is this, to believe in the one He has sent. And they say, wait a minute, that's just too much for us. Our forefathers ate manna in the desert. What miracle are you going to perform? What are you going to do to justify yourself to us? And Jesus looked at them and He said in verse 31, I am the bread of life. I am. In asking Him what to do, they were looking for a way to live. In asking Him to justify Himself, they were searching for a path to truth. At one point, Jesus Christ turned to His own disciples and said, do you want to leave me also? And they said, Master, to whom shall we turn? You have the very words of life. A way to live, the path to truth, the words of life. And in John 14:6, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am. All of these things are brought and revealed in the person of Christ. Jesus didn't come to reveal things about God. He came as God Himself, as the embodiment of everything. The reason why Christianity is unique in all world religions and ideologies is that its authority is not found in a system of thought, a certain type of experience, or doing or not doing certain things. Its authority is rooted and founded in the person of Jesus Christ. Do you know Him? That's why Paul, when he writes about the Christian faith in 2 Timothy 1:12, doesn't say, I know what I have believed. He says, I know whom I have believed. Christian faith is therefore unique in the sense that Jesus Christ is claiming something that no one else did. If you were to suggest to an Islamic scholar that Muhammad claimed equality with God, they would accuse you of blasphemy. And if you were speaking in the Middle East, in a country like Saudi Arabia, where I lived a lot of my life, you would be executed for making such a claim. Buddhism ultimately claims that there is really no type of personal being, personal God. But the answer is found within. It is not like all the religions are basically teaching the same thing. They differ at a very fundamental level. And what marks out the person of Christ above everyone else is He is claiming something for Himself that no one else even dares to claim. That's why Christians talk about something called the incarnation. Because in John 14:9, Jesus said, if you have seen me, you have seen the Father. That He is God in human form. I don't know if you know the story of a man, a psychiatrist who's transferred to a new hospital, and he's doing the rounds around his, this new psychiatric wing, and he comes to the first bed, he looks at the man who's sitting in the bed, he's sitting there with his hand stuffed under his shirt, his right hand. And the psychiatrist looks at this patient, he says, "Who are you?" And the guy says, "I am Napoleon." And the psychiatrist says, "That's interesting. Who told you that you're Napoleon?" And he said, "God told me." And the man in the bed next to him said, "I did not." There are all kinds of people in this world who have claimed divinity. Since the person of Christ, although none of the major founders of the world religions did, Jesus Christ alone made that claim, and he also claimed to meaningfully sustain that claim through his resurrection. Have you ever looked into the evidence for it? Have you ever wondered how God could reveal himself to you in a way whereby you didn't know that you were actually mad and should actually be locked up in a psychiatric hospital? The way that Christ revealed himself to us and ultimately justified and established the fact that he was divine was through his resurrection. Dead people do not come back to life, as a general rule, you may have noticed.
No founder of any major worldview that answers the questions we have talked about today has ever claimed divinity. And like he said, if you claimed that someone did, you would most likely be executed in certain worldviews for saying that so-and-so was God or on par with God. But Jesus is a man historically who claimed something that no one else dared to claim. And as Michael was saying, you are left with three options. Many people have claimed to be God after the person of Christ, but usually they are lying or don't have all of their marbles. So those are our options. And ladies and gentlemen, especially if you're looking at Christianity from the outside today, I urge you to take a look at this one thing. It bears your careful consideration. There was a man historically in the backwaters of the Roman Empire around 30 to 33 AD who claimed, in the Jewish sense, that he was God. Now, I would urge you to very carefully look at what he had to say, because when a man does this, when anyone does this, there's only those three options. He is either lying out of his teeth, in which case, why is he a great founder of many religions? Why listen to any of his words? He's not wise at all if he is a liar. Or he was insane. Or he was telling the truth. Logic dictates that these are the options that we must filter through his claims. We have a problem with the world today. It's in a mess. And it's in the same mess that it's been since people have been saying the world is in a mess historically. We have many views that think about these things, but this view, this power, this is his answer to solving these problems. And so I urge you, if you've looked at Christianity from the outside today, that you would take these things under careful consideration, especially the claims of this man named Jesus. He was Jewish. As you walk away from the show today, if you have any thoughts or questions about these things, please feel free to call us at 505-2STRIVE, 505-278-7483. Even when the show is not running, you can leave us a message and we'll get back with you. We will contact you if you have any questions or concerns about these things. If you want to text an idea, once again, you can text to Veracity at 555-888. If you're not signed up yet, just text the word Veracity to that number, Veracity. And you can start texting in to the show. We would love to hear from you if you have any thoughts or questions as we wrap up the show today. Before we wrap up, again, I want to urge you to attend in a month's time Defender Media's conference, Reliable. Can You Trust the Bible? Being hosted by Defenders Media, Kurt's speaking there, Kurt Jaros and Ted Wright. It is an all-day conference on March 18th. You can register and learn more information at defendersmedia.com. And if you are on the fence about whether or not to come, guys, KFC is doing lunch. Come to the conference. And that's all I have to say about that. So anyway, that does it for our show today, everybody. I'm grateful, and we are all grateful here, for the continued support of our patrons and partnership with our sponsors, Defenders Media, Consult Kevin, The Sky Floor, Rethinking Hell, and the Illinois Family Institute. And of course, Evolution 2.0. Thank you very much. Thank you to our listeners and our which is you guys, and to our guests today, which were the late and great C.S. Lewis and the 2005 teaching from Mr. Michael Ramsden. We thank these men for the work that they've done to make these things a little bit clearer for those of us who are thinking about them. Again, we're thankful so much to you today for listening in to the show and continuing to strive for truth on faith, politics, and society.
You've been listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. This is a listener-supported program. For more resources, including past shows, visit veracityhill.com.